My name is Nick Marshall. I'm the head of exhibitions and programs here at the George Eastman Museum. It's really great to be speaking to I would consider a packed theater this evening. Happy to have you all here. This is our third and final talk in the Wish You Were Here series this season. And every year since 2000, the museum has hosted this series, thanks to the generous sponsorship of Dr. Thomas N. Tischer. His support is, and always will be, an invaluable contribution to the museum, helping to inspire current and future generations of people who want to expand their knowledge and understanding of the world around them. Photographs impact the way we perceive ourselves and the environment. They bring about social change and open us up to new perspectives. They can provoke humor, happiness, and melancholy, and sometimes all three at the same time. And when shared, they can create a sense of community. So really, Tom, I want to thank you for providing us with this moment of sharing and community that we're able to have together. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you. And tonight we're excited to have Eric Kunsman provide a glimpse into his practice as an image maker and find out a little bit about how social components and collaboration have become a critical aspect to his work. Eric holds his MFA in book arts, printmaking from the University of Arts in Philadelphia and holds an MS in electronic publishing, graphic arts media, BS in biomedical photography, BFA in fine art photography, all from Rochester Institute of Technology. Yes, that's a lot of stuff, a lot of school. And now Eric is an educator at Rochester Institute of Technology for the Visual Communications Studies Department at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf and the School of Photographic Arts and Sciences. Additionally, which I believe you'll probably hear a little bit about this evening, Eric has operated Booksmart Studio for over 10 years here in the city. And though it has changed locations, it's always been an excellent resource for artists to collaborate and create. And I know personally, as I moved to Rochester in 2008 for grad school at RIT, and I think that's about the time close to then you started Booksmart, or was around then maybe. And I spent a lot of time. That's when Eric was at the location over by Village Gate, and I spent a lot of time as a student over there going to see exhibits. He would host exhibits there, have openings, and it was just such a great community environment. And I think was an important part of my growth as an artist, being able to have that in the city. So Eric, I want to thank you for that. So I'm glad that we're able to have you here now. Eric was named one of 10 black and white photographers to watch of 2018 by BW Gallerist. He was black and white best photographers of the year 2019 by Dodo magazine, and won the Association of Photography Gold Award for Open Series in 2019. He was a finalist, top 200 for Critical Mass in 2019, 2020, and 2021. Top 15 photographers for the Rust Belt Biennial. And his project, Felicific Calculus, was also awarded a Warhol Foundation grant through SEPA Gallery in Buffalo, New York. And if you saw on your way coming in, there was a handout. I think Eric will talk about that. But there's also some cards from that exhibition. If you want to take those, please feel free to take that as well on your way out. Eric has had 39 solo exhibitions, and his work has been exhibited in over 250 galleries and museums. He's been featured in Bloomberg Business Week, Dodo Magazine, All About Photo, and Lens Work. He is currently represented by Haute Gallery in Los Angeles and Malegmi in San Daniele del Friuli. Italian is not very good. And that is in Italy. Please join me in welcoming Eric Kunsman.
So first I want to take a moment to thank Nick Marshall, the George Eastman staff, and Dr. Tischer for this event. I've attended many in the past. It's an honor to be here. Secretly, it's kind of a dream come true, or at least something on my bucket list, I can say now. So what I want to do is initially just talk about brief introductions to what led me to the payphone work that I've been doing. And one of my mottos, obviously, is everything looks worse in black and white, because almost all my photographs are black and white. So by growing up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, one that really gave me the foundation for what I do with my photography. Being introduced to Walker Evans and watching the steel die. And as the steel died, photojournalists were descending on Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And that's what I got experienced to. And when I was growing up, I thought Bethlehem, Pennsylvania was Bethlehem from the Bible. You know, when you're growing up a little kid. And then it was a shock why the North Star was on the south side. So my whole world was turned upside down when I was about 9, and I realized things were off. But really going through Bethlehem, I grew up the son of a roofer. That's what I had to do for my childhood. So I learned how to work by living in Bethlehem. But again, exposure to Walker Evans' work really helped serve that foundation of history and photography. When I was in high school, the only good subjects I was actually passing most likely was history and art and photography. But just kind of showing you. So then I moved to Rochester in 1995, and we all know what happened to Kodak. So you can blame me for the problem, because it seems wherever I live, I kill off industry, or whatever the blue-collar work is. So that's where it's kind of interesting being here tonight for that also. But before I came to RIT, I was able to study with Draper for 1 year. And Lou really shaped the person I am, the photographer I am, and really the educator. He really taught me about how to be a human. That was the one thing, about making sure we're looking around, observing everything around us, and securing that moment for ourselves. So I want to just take a moment. One of my privileges, he passed away in 2001. And what happened was I wound up taking the photo program, being the coordinator at Mercer County Community College after he had passed away. And when I moved back, started Booksmart Studio 2005 here in Rochester, I was able to publish a book that the community college raised the funds to produce, to just get it out to different museums. He's here in the Eastman House collection. So some of the things that were pretty informative or formative for me, the Southwest Photo Workshop in 1999. I do not know where any of my photographs are from when I got the BFA that you all heard about and the BS. It wasn't until the Southwest Photo Workshop, and these are the only photographs that I remember from my education at RIT or ever show at this point. And after the Southwest Workshop, I was invited by the Dubois, who are here tonight, to actually work on the Big Shot as one of the camera operators. Today, myself and Dan Hughes, we're the co-coordinators of the Big Shot, and we get to tour all around. But again, another learning experience that really helped one of my next bodies of work that you'll see with painting with light. The second time I went on the Southwest Photo Workshop, it was no longer about the landscape, but it became about the people throughout the Southwest. It was when the Los Alamos fires were happening. This was a photo shoot. I think there was 14 firefighters. Don Dubois was with me. And we had 20 minutes to photograph all of them. And it was basically a marathon in 20 minutes. So when I took over the photo program at Mercer County Community College, I want to give the students the same experience that really became formative for myself. So I took, I believe it was a group of 15 students, my wife was with me, out to the Southwest. And I do not know how Ken White, Willie Osman, and Don created their own work while having students. I couldn't work with the 4x5 because every 5 minutes it was Eric. So I started this body work, which was Peripheral Visions. And it was just taking with the digital camera, fake infrared as I call it, and taking these photographs and then stitching them together later on. And this is one from Bryce Canyon. It's outside of Bryce Canyon. For those of you that know me well, you know my son's name is Bryce, so you can say this is where his name came from. But the series that really became my benchmark, I would say, was Thou Art Will Give. And this is something that I worked on for my MFA at University of the Arts. It's the first penitentiary in the United States. And for me, I rented out for my students. I had no interest in photographing there until I came across the warden's logbooks from the 1830s and 1840s. and just the penmanship, the idea that photography hadn't even started yet at that point, and then really mixing my love of history and photography. And this is what my MFA thesis work became. So it was the photography, it was the logbooks, as well as blending the text and imagery together. So I'm just going to show you a few of these. This was one that always stood out to me because of what the warden would write about the prisoners. And this is one most deeply hardened. And if you look at the bottom of the first paragraph, you can see that. And this particular series has now had 24 solo shows throughout the United States and 2 in Europe. But the one where I knew I was done, I was no longer going to scan work, was actually at RIT, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf Gallery, Dyer Art Center. I had all 3 spaces, and I filled it up, literally. And then lens work was the next. So my company, Booksmart Studio, some of you most likely have hopefully been to some of the gallery shows there in the past. There will be an introduction in a few moments to the Payphone work, which will be a video. You'll hear much, much more about it. But in the old space, we had 2 galleries for a while. We had the retail. We produced a lot of prints for the local community and throughout the United States. And then once we shut down the galleries, we actually introduced an HP Indigo into the space for the book production that we do. I love to joke with my students that I mix my left brain and my right brain. The right brain being University Arts, the left brain being the RIT, and they're constantly fighting inside of my brain. So the one problem that I had was when I started the studio in 2005, I did not take a single photograph until 2012. So for 7 years, I was no longer a photographer. And then one day it was kind of, what am I doing? Why did I go to school? I'm no longer doing what I love. And when 2008 hit, the studio went into serious debt. And through that debt, it really helped me understand what was happening to a lot of the small businesses. And that's where this body of work, Go Back Now, was born from, just looking at what New York State was doing to a lot of us, even though we were pretty much being destroyed at that time. And again, I'm the one that destroyed Kodak since I moved to Rochester. A lot of my work is based and influenced off my family. My daughter right now, Viviana, is my best critic. My son, as you can see, he's kind of going along with it. But right now, my daughter will actually draw on my prints, giving me advice. But one thing that did come from my son, Bryce, was when he was in first grade. It was during the election 2016. And because they were debating about Hillary versus Trump on the playground instead of playing soccer, I learned that I need to record it for some reason. And so what I started doing for the 4 years of the presidency was taking screenshots. And this was shown at the Rochester Contemporary Center here in Rochester during the election season, part of Trust But Verify. It's now 15 volumes. I stopped. The last inauguration, I had to stop. My body chemistry completely changed. My wife said I'm a much happier person now. But 15 volumes is what it became, 12 by 18, over 500 pages each. And again, this is a project I plan on getting it out to archives and collections, but it was something that, and I'm very serious, my body chemistry changed the day after the inauguration and that point on. But all these things, for 10 years, my studio being at Neighbor of the Arts, or being in Neighbor of the Arts, and having to relocate, which you're going to hear about, is really what led to this project, the Felicific Calculus, Technology as a Social Marker of Race, Class, and Economics in Rochester. And what I want to do, so we have a video crew here, Hill and Valley Creative. They're recording for Eastman House, or Eastman Museum today. But they've also created a video documentary. They've been tagging along this project for the last 4 years. So if anybody knows this project better than anybody in the room, they probably know it better than I do at this point. But I want to give you a quick 4-minute teaser. So in the pamphlet you picked up outside, in the back of it is QR codes and websites to the YouTube where you can watch. This is a full 21-minute video, as well as the collaborators that have been working with me. Their videos are there because there's a lot of information that we packed into these. But we're going to watch this for 4 minutes.
In 2017, I relocated to a different part of Rochester, New York with my studio. My company's called Booksmart Studio. For 10 years, it was near the Eastman Museum. We had 2 galleries. We were constantly showing, different exhibitions, even for the Rochester Institute of Technology where I teach. 2017, the building owner passed away, and his son took over and put us on a month-to-month lease. And I had way too much equipment, so I finally started to look around outside of the neighborhood of the arts because I just couldn't afford anything in that area to purchase because we need a fairly large space. So I started looking in different areas of Rochester and found where I'm currently at right now, which is the home of Booksmart Studio, which is up near the baseball stadium and the soccer stadium in Rochester, known as the Hosanna neighborhood. The knee-jerk reaction I was getting from a lot of friends, colleagues, was that this area was a war zone. So I started looking at why this labeling was being applied. And I noticed 3 things: neighborhood bars, corner stores, and an abundance of payphones. So I settled on just documenting the payphones at first as social markers.
I get something to eat afterwards, but if it's okay if I take a picture of your payphone?
So we're taking a picture of just the payphone.
Are you okay with it? I was just gonna take a picture of your payphone. I know it sounds a little bit weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
I'm documenting all of them in Monroe County, that's all.
Oh, okay.
So the project has actually evolved from, at first I'd be driving around. I had some friends, Matt Geisey and Dan Hughes and Adam Montoya would drive around with me, and we would just literally be looking for payphones. The joke was, it was payphone hunting.
It must be that building, that nice building back over there. Right there it is. It's in St. Paul right now, since we've done most of down below.
Within 6 square blocks, it was pretty easy because there's about 45 around my studio. But then it grew to be more about the city, so we started driving to different areas to photograph.
Never actually been. Just go in and scout it out first. I'll be right back out.
Is it okay if I take a picture of the payphone? Okay, I have a guy videotaping me too, and then we're gonna eat afterwards. There you go. Oh, he's documenting me, yeah. But
One technology to another.
Exactly. We still have a lot of them still in Rochester, so.
That's because they keep in the area.
And the poor, yep. It's exactly, most people think crime, but it's not.
No, it's not. People have to be able to communicate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is where we have 1,455 of them. Two kinds of shooting.
And that's where we'll end it. If you want to see more, it's up on YouTube. There's another 17 minutes. But what I want to express, you heard where this started for me. It really also started with these boys. The first Penske truck I backed up, moving my space, Harry, Elijah, and Grumpy. Grumpy's on the left, by the way. And they said, "Mister, do you need help?" I said, "Sure, if you want to help carry the rolls, carry them all the way back." And about halfway through, they're like, "Are we going to get paid?" And this is the path they had to take. And as you can see, I have a slight problem collecting Kodak, everything Kodak. But halfway through, they asked if we're going to get paid, and I said, "I don't have any money." They're like, "Well, what do you have, mister?" And I went through, and there was coffee cups from the previous owner, and they said, "Can we pick which one we want?" I said, "Absolutely. But Grumpy, you need to let me know what your name is." He goes, "It's Grumpy." I go, "No, your real name." He goes, "Look, mister, when I was 1, my mother took a lollipop from me. I've been Grumpy ever since." I'm like, "All right." Nice to meet you, Grumpy. And he's the only boy of those 2 that is no longer in the neighborhood where I live. But this is currently Booksmart Studio now, and I'm spoiled with what I can do. And you heard, when I first started the project, I started just driving around the neighborhood. It was about 6 square blocks that I was driving around looking for these payphones, just trying to figure out why everybody was labeling this area. When I experienced these boys that came over, it's just like you saw in the 50s and 60s in movies, people coming over greeting me as I'm moving in. You know, the gentleman who lives across the street, Roberto, I mean, he's like the mayor of that part of the city. Everybody knows Roberto, he's repairing everybody's cars, but it's one of those things that we constantly, it's much, much more of community in regards to that. And it's completely mixed. Right now, we can tell you it's 30% black, 30% white, 30% Latino. And there's about another 10% which is Asian. So it really is a complete mix, but everybody is taking care of the community in that neighborhood. When I go outside at night or during the day and at night, it's very, very quiet. It's not what we see on the news. And these are some early examples. These are the first photographs that I took. This is one that's been shown quite a bit. And what happened was Matt Geisey helped me by Contact Frontier, and they gave me the list of where all the payphones are located. But these that I'm showing you right now are all within that neighborhood, even on the corners of the streets in the neighborhood. This was my ode to Walker Evans when I first started it. This is the corner store that I visit anytime I need my Dr. Pepper fix, which many of you know what that's about. So these are just showing you some of the examples of the early work. And once I started to have those previous images, I didn't know what it was. And I was supposed to have the exhibition at SEPA. They were going to show the penitentiary work. They came for a site visit, and he's like, we no longer want to show that work. We want to show this. I'm like, this is 3 months old. I don't even know what it is. He goes, there's something here. It's going to be something. So we want to show you. We'll give you 3 years. Well, that got postponed for COVID reasons, so it gave me an extra year to do some work. But this is where you can start to see. As I've been going around photographing these payphones, there's many locations where I will revisit or see something that changes in that location. And I'm able to watch those environments change around it. One of the biggest things about this body of work, carrying around the Hasselblad with me, I've been able to talk to so many people on the streets. With that in mind, anytime somebody comes out aggressive and I have the camera with me, they're like, what are you doing? And I say, I'm taking a picture of a payphone. It instantly changes their reaction, and I can have a conversation. I've had conversations with people from every walk of life that's in Rochester, and some really, really cool conversations, and I've learned so much from the community because of that. The entire series is on Kodak film. Without Kodak, this city would not be what it is today. You can think that positively or negative, but it just would not be Rochester without Kodak. If you think about all the different corporations that have branched out of Kodak. And that's why I have to shoot it on Kodak film. What a lot of people don't realize is it is all on color film, which I scan and convert because I'm a geek and I have a lot more control of doing so. I think those of you laughing know me a little too well. So that's the payphones, and the approach to the project is watching them change year after year. This set of payphones by Busy Bee also really changed the dynamic of the project because this bank of 2 I've seen used the most. And that's where at first I was looking at them as social markers. And then what it became was looking at the payphones and why are people still using them? This is 2017. And that's where I needed to learn more for myself. But without these, I would never have thought of the idea of trying to record the individual stories that are still using the payphones. When it was installed at SEPA Gallery, one of the parts of my project or the exhibitions is having payphones there that you can pick up, dial a number, and hear the story of those people that are still using the payphones. The use of black and white, for me, allows me to break down some of the barriers where you start instantly labeling different areas of the city as to the economic status. And that's one of the things that can get hidden a little bit more. But there are plenty of hints, but it makes you have to look at the images that much deeper to try to pull out that information for yourself. So I've photographed 900 of the 1,455 payphones. I'm going to show you all 900 tonight. I'm just kidding. I promised, Nick said, you know, normally there's not enough visuals. I'm like, I promise you there will be way too many visuals for tonight. But one of the things was when I started seeing that individuals were still using them. I wanted more information. This was my first attempt at mapping. I knew I needed help. So Michael Reardon had introduced me to Rebecca Walker, who you're going to see a video from in a few moments. But I'll explain what I want to do is take the location of the payphones and demonstrate the census information and overlap that information so we can show the viewers much more, but also make them have to interact with the maps. Otherwise, it just becomes another element on the wall that nobody wants to pay attention to. So here's Rebecca's introduction.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Walker, the Digital Humanities and Social Sciences Librarian at RIT Libraries. I work on the Felicific Calculus project as a collaborator who developed maps and visuals using the payphone and added contextual demographic data. My role as a digital humanities librarian means that I work with faculty, staff, and students at RIT to develop digital projects, be they in the classroom, for personal research, or engaged with the community. My role is to work with the faculty or students to provide structure, resources, and to help answer questions related to data handling, methods, and technologies. I was connected to Eric and this project in spring 2021. Eric and I discussed his plans and the upcoming exhibition in Buffalo and what we could do together to enhance the story being told by his photographs. We talked about the data that he had, being payphone locations from Frontier, and what we could bring in from other sources like the US Census Bureau to ask questions of that data. Like what else is happening in these zip codes, and what can we see from where the payphones are located? In the end, we built two forms of accompanying visuals, maps and charts. All of these supplemental visuals focus on demographics of the community, including housing, income, and race. We started with the data from Frontier, which included the 1,455 payphones in Monroe County. Each phone had a name, address, city, state, and zip associated with it, as well as its unique phone number. We had to round out this information by Frontier to get it to the point where we could use it in the tool that we wanted. First and foremost, we pulled geographic coordinates for all 1,455 payphones. I also went through the entries and added category labels to the payphone locations, like medical, restaurant or bar, education, mall or plaza, etc., to see if looking at categories of where the phones are located was interesting or revealed patterns. Adding these labels to the phone locations revealed that approximately 20% of the phones are located outside or inside standalone businesses, followed by 14% at educational institutions and 13% at restaurants and bars. We use the location coordinates to create a form of geographic file called a shapefile that can be used in a technology called a Geographic Information System, or a GIS. Creating a shapefile of these phones allowed me to pull it into the tool we were using, ArcGIS Online, and view all phones as points on a map. This also meant that we could pull that same file into other maps to show that the phones in concert with other features. Next, within ArcGIS Online, I pulled in maps created by the US Census Bureau that showed demographic features like poverty levels, housing values, median household income, and then limited the scope from the entire United States to Monroe County, New York. These maps enriched the information being shown by the payphone locations and helped to contextualize Eric's photos. We see in this map, for example, that zip codes with high concentration of payphones have a lower median household income on average. We created the charts using Tableau Public. In many ways, these visuals required the most personal judgment about what to include. Census Bureau data are extensive and incredibly specific, and choosing single variables to show can make you feel like you're not displaying the complexity of the data and the people that data represent. In building the charts in Tableau, we strove to show information that would complement the maps and be understandable to a wide audience. We used Census Bureau data and utilized corresponding colors in the charts to reflect the colors on the maps as well. All visualizations in Tableau are available online and will remain public in perpetuity. Moving forward, we hope to update the visuals to reflect 2020 census numbers and build out the analysis even further.
So here's some examples. This is where I'm not going to talk as much about the maps and the data because that's what's in the pamphlet for you to take home and really look at. It's broken down by zip codes. You can see, the neighborhood where my studio is located. The average household income is less than $29,000 a year. It doesn't mean that people are not working 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs to do so. But in those booklets, I hope that's where, if you have not grabbed one on your way out, you will grab one of these. You can look at the relationship of the payphones and this data that we're providing. And this is where you can look at the percent of, below poverty levels. One thing that we are not doing, is looking at the crime maps, because all that we had data for with that is Rochester. We don't have the rest of the county, so we didn't want to be biased. But that's something that Janelle Dudabunwar will talk about in a few moments in her presentation, in her video. But I just want to kind of give you a quick glimpse into what is in those packets for you all to take with you today. So these are some of the photographs that I've been exhibiting quite a bit. But one thing I want to point out is watching the environments around the payphones change. This was one of my favorite photos for a long time. But then I went back, and the payphone actually at first had outlasted the barbershop. But then the icy store came in and took out the payphone and many of the trees, worried about what might happen with people lurking under those trees. The removal of the payphones. This is from the Genesee Brewery. The history of the payphones, everything around it. When they're being removed now at this point, I feel it actually tells much more of the story oftentimes. So I'm going to go through some of these locations a little bit faster to make up. Some of the locations around the studio. This is that corner store that I go to all the time. Observing the scene constantly changing. The one day that I passed this, I had to go back instantly. These are, as I said before, they're color film. The building is a magenta, reddish color. These are 1970 orange chairs. It is the most incredible photograph, which you will all never see. After Daniel Prude was killed in Rochester, the rioting had occurred. One thing that was really odd, and I was so mad at myself for it, was I was so upset that this payphone over on Lyle and Mount Reed was destroyed, because I saw it used quite a bit. And here, the Family Dollar is destroyed, which is one of the ways for people to get food. And why am I so mad about them destroying the payphone? That was 2020. 2021, payphone's been repaired, Family Dollar is back. So this is where the idea of Felicific Calculus comes into play from Frontier. They're not making money off of these payphones, but instead they are making, for once, the judgment for the greater good of the community. And that's what this project's really about. Also the labeling that we are applying to many of these areas, as you've heard many of us talk about already. And in a few moments, the video from Janelle will address that much, much better than I could ever state, and you'll hear about that. But for me, one of my favorite days for this entire project was this day, going into Kodak, going through Kodak Park, and photographing the remaining payphones that are there. You've seen my studio, you've seen my collection of Kodak paraphernalia. I think you understand why that was one of the best days. But why do we still have banks of 4 in Rochester? This is another one of my favorites, because I pass it every day going to RIT when I'm coming from Penfield. And I'm constantly watching the environment change. And now the Cricket store is actually teasing the payphone at this point. And it finally gave up. Different location, don't worry, it's still there. Frontier Field. Obviously, Frontier sponsoring our minor league baseball stadium. There were 10 within the stadium. Sadly, in September, they were all removed. The shells of them are still there, and what I was hoping to do is to get payphones, just like I did at SEPA, installed where it could be the history of the Red Wings because of being Frontier Field still. So one of the things, if anybody knows anybody that works at Frontier or the person who's still responsible for the payphones, I've been trying to find this gentleman for the last 4 years, and I got very close a few weeks ago, but the person that was working at the Red Wings had since deleted all of his emails because he left the job. Within the schools here in Rochester. So Mary Virginia Swanson challenged me in 2019, saying this will be great to get into galleries and museums, just like we have right now. But what good is that going to do? Because this is a grassroots. If you need to let people understand that these payphones are still being used, how are you going to do that? And one of the ideas was trying to reach out to the media, get it out. Humble Arts Foundation, Bloomberg, Our News. But one of the problems after the Bloomberg and the Our News article is Frontier has started to aggressively remove the payphones, but they are removing the ones that didn't work, that are more or less social markers. The one on the corner of Goodman and Park Ave was removed. Monroe Ave, the Dunkin' Donuts. So one of the things in the future I plan on trying to do is add a fence installation throughout Rochester. And the reason is addressing people to a project-dedicated website where we are having the maps interactive and the data, which is simply rochesterpayphones.com. In the pamphlet, it talks about my personal portfolio website, but there's also the Rochester Payphones, which is specific so you can find this information, making it easier for individuals. But I knew I needed to go a little bit further. And that's where then Rebecca introduced me to Janelle Banoir, and she brings a whole other element, which you're gonna hear about in a second, of how to actually get this out to more grassroots and challenge what's happening within Rochester. So this one's a little bit longer, but she has a call of action for you at the end of this. So.
Hi, I am Dr. Janelle Banoir, and I am a Senior Research Associate with the Center for Public Safety Initiatives at RIT. We are housed in the Criminal Justice Department, and we conduct locally focused, nationally relevant action research. Some of you may be familiar with our founder, Dr. John Klofus, a renowned criminologist and RIT Distinguished Professor. Dr. Irshad Altheimer is the current director of our center, and he continues moving forward John's vision. We work closely with the community to address issues that matter to the community. We push for data to drive decisions, and we push for process and planning. We do this in collaboration with a number of community-based organizations, such as Rise Up Rochester, Teen Empowerment, and the Father Tracy Advocacy Center. I'm assuming we have a lot of smart people in the room today who know what research is, but I think it's important to explain that research looks like many things. It can be in a lab in fully controlled conditions. It can be downloading housing data from the Census Bureau, running statistical analyses, and making sense of those findings. Or it can be meeting in a community to answer the question, what are the consequences of an open-air drug market? It all begins with a research question, followed by a methodological approach, data collection, analysis, and then findings. At the root of research is curiosity about the world around us. So then, how do I fit into Felicific Calculus? Upon moving studio spaces, Eric made the observation, my friends are calling this a bad neighborhood. Then he moves into the studio and notices all these payphones. He sees the visual artistry in these objects, but then Eric takes it further. He starts to identify these as social markers. And now he's on to something more than simply the beauty and emotion that these photographs emit. He's wondering, what exactly do these payphones mean? Why are they still here? Why do some operate and some don't? Who uses them? He has questions and lots of them. Now, unbeknownst to Eric, a research agenda seems to be emerging around the payphones and neighborhood social conditions, pulling me into the project because maybe I know something about research. So what is a social marker? I think about social markers as cues that tell you something about the social status of the community, including the quality of life or even social deprivation. Traditional social markers include crime data, employment data, and income levels, but there are also many non-traditional social markers. So let's go a little deeper. When you drive through a neighborhood and you see cracked sidewalks, litter, dilapidated porch steps, paint peeling on houses, boarded up buildings, what does that indicate to you? You might say a bad neighborhood. I'll push back on that. When you drive through a neighborhood with wide, maintained sidewalks, planters with vibrant flowers, big houses with new siding, new windows, long driveways, manicured yards, what does that indicate to you? A good neighborhood, perhaps? Why are we using the terms good versus bad? Is this an accurate dichotomy? Notice that I didn't even describe any people so far, just the environment, yet we are talking about people. Essentially, good people are people who have money, access to more opportunity, and live in neighborhoods that have been invested in by their local government. And bad people are poor and live in neighborhoods with significant government divestment. So then why is righteousness associated with opportunity? How is an entire neighborhood righteous? Is that even possible? I imagine that many of you live in the good neighborhoods. Have you ever experienced bad behavior in these good neighborhoods? I certainly have. What about these so-called bad neighborhoods? Have you ever experienced good behavior in these neighborhoods? Of course you have. See, when we associate poverty with morality, it puts the entire burden on the individual and omits everything that we know about poverty, like how social mobility is entwined with where you were born. You don't even have control over that. how concentrated poverty overlaps race in disturbing ways. So now race is in the mix. And the overlap between poverty and the criminal justice system entanglement, which leads to even more poverty. Notice that these don't have to do with individual traits or personalities, but these are social constructs that impact opportunity. So let's take my not so unique abstract thoughts and bring them into focus on the local level. I've been studying the local heroin market for more than 4 years. On the screen is a density map which shows the concentration of drug overdoses across Monroe County. These are fatal and non-fatal overdoses known to law enforcement, so someone called 911. In 2018, the peak year for overdoses, both locally and nationally, there were more than 1,100 overdoses across Monroe County. As you can see, these overdoses are concentrated where? This neighborhood along North Clinton Ave between Upper Falls and Avenue D, where you see the red spot. Bad people doing bad things, using drugs, in a bad neighborhood, right? It fits the narrative. But let's unpack this data. Who exactly is overdosing? Who are the customers? Across the county, 75% of the overdose victims are white, majority male. Okay, this tracks. 70% of the county population is white, non-Hispanic, but still there's an overrepresentation of males overdosing. Now let's look just at the city of Rochester. 66% of the overdose victims in Rochester are white, non-Hispanic, but only 36% of the Rochester population is white, non-Hispanic. Now, let's look at this location that has the highest concentration of overdoses across the entire county. 50% of the overdose victims in 2018 were white, non-Hispanic, while only 3% of the neighborhood residents are white, non-Hispanic. So the people who are overdosing overwhelmingly do not live in these neighborhoods where they are overdosing. So what is the point? People who live in the neighborhood are dealing with the consequences of our nation's opioid problem, even though, on the majority, these residents did not contribute to the opioid problem. So then why is it happening here? We're back to the bad neighborhood. So how bad are these residents really? I'm sure there is still a way to blame them. Surely they could have done something to stop this from happening, right? So what did happen when residents tried to push back against the drug market? I conducted interviews and focus groups with residents to find out. Have you ever had to deal with people selling drugs on the corner of your street? People injecting heroin at a bus stop? People overdosing on the sidewalk? What happens when you call the police about drug deals and no one shows up? What happens when you show up to city council meetings and nothing changes? What happens when you strike up the courage to say something to the dealers, but they won't move? It's really easy to judge other people. Would you stay motivated if it took 3 years to get speed bumps installed on your street to deter drug traffic? If it took 4 years to demolish an abandoned property that's a known drug house? If you sat in meetings with the police, and in those meetings, they talked about observing drug sales on camera, yet no arrests were made. If it took 3 years to build a small fence around a dumpster to deter drug dealers and open drug use, and the fence still isn't complete. These social markers, including the payphones, indicate a neglected neighborhood, and this reputation persists in spite of all the efforts of the residents. We reduce all of their pain, sweat, and tears to, that's a bad neighborhood, solely blaming the people. What about the role of government and powerful institutions, including the influence that the arts can have? So what can you do? Visit these neighborhoods by getting some of the best Puerto Rican food around, check out the various wall therapy murals in the neighborhood, visit La Marqueta at International Plaza in the warm months. Do something instead of diminishing and oversimplifying the issue to being a bad neighborhood. The problem is not the people who are trying to thrive.
So you see why I'm working with these two individuals, right? I am learning so much from them, and we are in our infancy. We have only been working together about 6 months and meet maybe every other week, and there's much, much more that we will be doing coming in the future. And also tonight with the book signing, both Rebecca and Janelle will be there if you have any questions for them. But what I want to do is I want to walk you through the areas that Janelle just talked about. Goodman Street. I don't know how Nick Tahoe's got in here, but there it is. Figure we had to throw a little Rochester in there. But North Clinton, this is directly dead set in the open air heroin market. The abandoned property she's talking about is on the other catty corner to the parking lot. But what I want to do is go through some of these photos. Would you know that this is Avenue D? Joseph Avenue. And I said before, having the camera, it does enable me to break down some of those barriers and talking about what I'm doing with the payphone. But that judgment of what areas are good or bad. My old studio at the Anderson Arts Building, which is right near Good Luck, which many of you might frequent, was broken into 3 times in 9 months. The same crew was getting me over and over and over. And knock on wood, my new studio has not had a single break-in. But there's that labeling that has been applied to the area where I used to be as being the safe neighborhood. So we're going to go through some of these fairly quick. Hamlin Beach State Park. Why is it there? How many of you have ever been to Hamlin Beach? Anybody have a cell phone signal there when you were there? Muir Woods in California, some of the other locations I've been to. So why are they being maintained for these areas? Why are they being maintained in certain areas in Rochester compared to others? And this is one of the reasons why I make sure if there are individuals, you cannot detect or understand what race they are, because I'm not allowing you as the viewer of my photographs to apply those labels. Here's that 2 kinds of shooting photograph. This is the end result of that one at good old Campy's. One of my favorite photographs. And the designer used to share or sublease space with me in the old studio. Talking about small world in Rochester. In a few slides, what I want to do is I'm going to turn off all the labels, and I'm going to go through very quickly, 2 seconds per slide. And I want you to think about what environment you believe it's located. Here we go. This is a cruel way to take out a payphone. But the last 40 photographs I've shown you are all the suburbs of Rochester. But how would you know that once the label's been removed? What's going to happen as these stores disappear, like Sears and many of the payphones that do serve as a lifeline, let alone social marker here in Rochester? Will they just become graffiti art in the McDonald's in Henrietta by RIT? So are you willing to be the change to Rochester? Think about the prejudgments that we apply in many of these areas. I think Janelle said it best. Walk some of these streets. Oftentimes we're applying labels to these areas way too quickly. These are my 2. For me, it starts with these 2 individuals. My son, Bryce, my daughter, Viviana. My daughter can now spot a payphone before I can. I'm going to go through these real quick because I want to get to one last thing. But this is what the SEPA installation looked like. Here's the payphones. There's representing both Wall Therapy and Eric Lehman for 1975 on that payphone. It's in the crowd. Because it was good old COVID, we used we used phone books to put the hand sanitizer and disinfectant on it. Had to adapt. But for me, what was really important besides the photographs was the phones for the audio as well as the payphones, the maps. You had to engage with these maps because the key is blacked out. I joke with my students, everybody has ADD or ADHD. By forcing you to interact with that map, it forced you to have to look at the data. Another proud part of this was the Buffalo payphonography, which was what we did was we invited the community to go out and photograph their payphones. And we installed those, and then all their photographs. And then we mapped them to look at the census data with Buffalo. Also, a gentleman from Los Angeles, Screwy Blooms. There's a whole Instagram community that I belong to that's all about payphones. It's odd, for sure. But Screwy Blooms is the oddest of them all. And he loves to make just artwork out of empty shell phone booths. And this is the Buffalo payphonography. And whenever I exhibit this, I want to go into communities and work with the curators and talk about what social markers are in that community and invite them to go in and create the same type of event where it becomes about community participation. Otherwise, it just becomes a documentation on Rochester. When Magna was in Rochester a few years ago, Booksmart was responsible for printing all of their work. And there was a lot of throwback as to, what's it saying about Rochester? And the reason why I'm hurrying a little bit is what I want to show is that I have a side project which is called Lifelines throughout the United States. We are not the only community where we still have payphones. Point Reyes Station, Muir Woods. I'm going to tell you a quick story. We were on the bus going to Muir Woods. My daughter was 5 at the time. It was right as COVID starting. My daughter yells out payphone. If you could see all the adults turn around and look at her like, what is she doing? She's normally pretty good, doesn't walk away from us, but she gets off in her Sunday dress, skips to it, picks it up, and says it works. Now all the adults are looking for the candid camera at this point. Then she saw somebody come use it. She goes, what's he doing? I'm like, he's making a call. No, I know that. Why is he holding his cell phone in his hand? He doesn't remember the number he's calling. And, well, I would. And the gentleman says, well, I don't, so there. And we walk away. New Orleans, after Katrina, the only means for communication, payphones. So if we start to remove these, what happens? Tucson. I do not show individuals in my phones out in public. But these two individuals came over and told me a story that these payphones had been removed 2 weeks ago because 4 weeks prior to that, they had built this homeless encampment at this spot, this abandoned strip mall area. So by denying them the access to communication, they thought that would take away the homeless encampment. Again, luckily with my exhibitions and portfolio reviews, whenever I travel, I go payphone hunting. It's also now I have a network of individuals throughout the country that send me texts whenever they find a payphone and tell me where it's at. It's become a pretty big addiction, unfortunately, let alone the Instagram community that's out there. And one thing that we're all doing is we're all doing things differently within that Instagram community. And we're forcing a group or forming a group that will start to push this forward. My wife doesn't know this, so I'm about to get in trouble, but I actually own an actual Superman payphone booth that's out in LA at the LA payphone photographer's house, and his wife loves the fact that it's in their backyard too. So it's only been a year, hun, but the studio paid for it. Joplin, Missouri, when I was out at the University of Pittsburgh. Nick, do you think I showed enough slides? Enough imagery? Visiting my hometown. And one thing that was really odd for me when I was in Buffalo, I started seeing them in color. So I guess everything doesn't always look better in black and white. My last statement that I want to share with you is 2 weeks ago, the UK decided to save their payphones. The reason why they decided to save it is for emergencies. So the UK is ahead of us. So one of my goals, my missions now, this has become activism in some way, is to bring this not-for-profit Futel into Rochester, which offers free payphones, which would be voice over IP. And with that, this is how you can get involved locally. This is also in the back of the pamphlet, but thank you for your time.